fact, I was a tad nervous at first, recognizing that this was an incredible tool, and we had talked about it internally, and we had actually listed 3 of my veterinarians to start working on some questions that they thought would be valid for a 360. So we were even considering doing one and kind of making up the questions here, and then when we kind of realized that, wow, Caliper can help us do this, we had planted a few seeds, and there was the recognition that we were looking at a 360. Patrick, I try to be very open in the way I communicate, but I knew that kind of going into this that be a few that would be nervous, and especially ones where there might be a little bit of a tenuous relationship between themselves and the district manager or elements within the district. So knowing that, as I started to roll this out, I clearly explained that this was not for punitive measures and that we were looking for information so that we could be more skilled in what we do and be more functional and more of a resource to the district. And really, if we can't do that, Patrick, then we have no value to the company, really, because sales drives the big profit bus, and we support that. And I explained all that, and they trusted in that it was not for punitive measures, but for developmental purposes, and we've used that accordingly. And I'm pleased to say that when we were getting ready to do this with you guys, I had universal acceptance within group, and with the understanding that we were being a bit of a pioneer in doing this, they thought that was pretty darn cool. And I was also lucky to have a group that they are veterinarians. They were used to, training and receiving feedback and being graded and whatnot, just as the course of their professional lives. So I had a pretty receptive group that once they knew that we were using it accordingly in developing and trying to increase our value, then it was very easy to roll out.
I think that's very important, how to position it as a way to help someone develop their talents as distinct from a performance review.
Exactly.
Do you see this as a continual process? In other words, will you look to do the 360 again at a later date?
Absolutely, Patrick. It has been so valuable. It's been so well accepted. And with us being that pioneer of sorts, it helped elevate our status within the company. And I would bet that you could quiz any one of my 30 veterinarians, and they would say it was of tremendous benefit to them. And Patrick, in fact, one that is kind of our ultimate skeptic came to me right away after the 360 and said, this was great. This is great stuff. I learned so much about myself and the relationships that I have within the district and the people that depend on me. Let's do it again. And so when we'll do it again, Patrick, is still to be determined, but we definitely will do 360s and do these as the course of our normal business.
That's so interesting, the way you described that, how any project, I think, part of its success often is when the biggest skeptic comes around and says, this worked.
It made me feel good. It really did, Patrick, and I know it should make you guys feel great, too.
Excellent, excellent. Before we let you go, Hal, do you have any advice you might share with any executive who is considering 360s for their company for the first time?
Patrick, I think the biggest advice is don't wait. Do it now. It's a tremendous benefit, and I think the secret is in how it's positioned as a learning tool. It's not a punitive tool in any way, shape, or form. If individuals are thinking about 360s, to go ahead and pull the trigger and do it as fast as possible because it is a tremendous benefit.
That's marvelous, Hal. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been great talking to you.
Patrick, thank you. And if you guys need anything more, please don't hesitate to think about us. It's been a great experience, and we have really benefited and enjoyed it, Patrick. We certainly have.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
It's so nice to hear how Hal was able to not only develop his team, but also give them the extra time and feedback that they wanted. Joe, I heard Hal mention how he truly believes that this process is for development purposes and not for performance measures. Can I have your thoughts on that?
I strongly believe, Patrick, that they should be used as a part of a developmental process. As a developmental tool, 360s are extremely powerful because we've talked about this, how it helps you become more self-aware and have insight into how others perceive your behavior and your performance. When used as a performance evaluation tool, they begin to have sort of a negative connotation because people get upset that others may perceive them in a way that hurts their performance evaluation. The 360s used that way are obviously shared with management and usually HR. it's no longer a confidential developmental experience for the individual. It becomes almost a popularity contest. You spend your time trying to convince your peers and your direct reports that you're a wonderful guy or gal, and that completely defeats the purpose of the developmental tool. Used as development, we like to keep them confidential and anonymous. The raters are certainly anonymous, and we encourage the raters to give honest feedback that will help someone grow and develop. The 360 survey results are kept confidential with the participant. We do ask that the participant afterward reflect and decide maybe what they want to do in terms of specific things to work on throughout the next year or two, and discuss that with their manager so that they can let the manager know what they got out of it and how it was good for them in terms of becoming more self-aware and what they wanted to work on developmentally as a result. In that sense, it works very well. The person tends to take the feedback in a much more accepting way and tends to want to reflect on it, not who said it, but what was said. So it shifts the whole feeling about being a participant with the 360. So we always recommend that it be used only for developmental purposes.
I think what I heard you saying there, Joe, was the individual then owns that information and takes it and uses it depending upon how much he or she wants to. And then the idea about sharing with the supervisor and saying, this is what I'm working on. I think oftentimes just that process of saying out loud, this is what I'm doing. I think once somebody does that, we're more open to them changing because they're saying that that's what they're working on. Otherwise, they could just be doing those same behaviors, but because of our preconceived notions of who they are and what they're doing, we wouldn't see them as changing.
Yes, and the beautiful part of sharing that with your manager is your manager can then coach and support you. Depending on budgetary constraints in an organization, they may not be able to do external coaching, but the manager can certainly coach the individual based on their development plan that came out of the 360 results. So it empowers the manager to be there as a support and to be able to say to the individual, boy, I've noticed some changes, because everybody needs positive reinforcement to keep going and to keep trying, because behavioral changes are not easy. So I think there's a real benefit in opening up about what you're working on, even with your direct reports or your peers. Oftentimes, if you can say something like, boy, I realize I've been holding on to too much, and I really want to help you all have the experience of being able to do new and challenging tasks and things. So I want you to be able to give me feedback if you feel like I'm not delegating things or I'm holding on to too much. And just that part about becoming a little bit vulnerable to others immediately changes people's perception about you. So there's a lot of advantages to sharing what you're working on and how you're trying to grow personally with other people.
You talked about the developmental plan, and is that a formal plan that is developed with you and the person you're coaching? What does this developmental plan look like?
As a result of the 360, we have a developmental plan that is part of the 360 process. And what we do as we're going through the ratings and providing feedback and looking at the open-ended comments, we make notes on a worksheet about some things that usually become themes throughout the 360, things that you're hearing multiple times from different groups of people. So we're making notes of those as we go along. And then when we get to the development plan at the end, we look back at our worksheets and we talk about it again in terms of what we've heard from others and use that information in order to create this development plan. We usually take 2 or 3 goals at the most to focus on. And in choosing those goals, they might be things like improve your listening skills or better communication or learning to delegate or any number of things that you may have heard as feedback to your 360. And then what we do is we talk about how do you work on those, because it's not easy. And we talk about particular strategies that might work for that individual and talk about resources that they might need and how they're going to measure whether there's improvement or not. And many times it's in asking people. Sometimes it's repeating the 360 again a year later to see if there have been improvements in the ratings and the comments. So there's a number of ways that we can measure improvement. And the 360 also gives you particular development ideas based on some of the things that might have been lower ratings for you. So you've got some information to read as part of the 360 process, some coaching tips, some books that you might be interested in, and you can use this information also when thinking about your own development plan. Some of those things might be part of what you want to focus on. So the coach helps the individual create this development plan, and then we like to follow up with coaching afterward to make sure that the development plan is clear and the person is being able to work on it and is understanding how to go about it. But at the very least, the individual's manager can review that development plan with them and, again, be able to coach them and support them as they're making behavioral changes.
I can see where the coach would be very important, because otherwise you might just get stuck inside of your own head.
Yes, and actually coaching is very important after the 360. It's wonderful to have somebody that you can talk to about things that you're trying, what's working,
Right.
what's challenging you, some of the things that you're feeling about trying to make these changes. And when you go through your experiences with the coach, it's nice to be able to get some feedback and advice on the things that you're doing well, some other strategies that you might use to improve. So coaching is a wonderful follow-up engagement after the 360 results have been given.
When an organization is introducing the 360, can you give us some tips for how to introduce this so that it comes across with the intended purpose, and how, in particular, you might address some skeptics or people who are downright reluctant to participate?
Sure. I think people generally are a little reluctant to learn what people think. So because we like to keep it confidential and strictly for the individual's eyes only, I think that skeptics then sort of warm to the idea, because then it really is helpful. What we do ask is that you share the resulting development plan that we just discussed with your manager, because that's what you want to focus on as a result of the feedback you got. And that's where you can use support from either a coach or your manager or a mentor. So I think that the skepticism usually falls away when an organization introduces the 360 process as a development process only, and that it is for the individual's eyes only.
This has been excellent, Joe. We've learned so much. We've listened to two people who have been very open and candid about what they've learned through this process and how they, in fact, have become much better managers and leaders of their teams. Can you give us some final thoughts, Joe? As organizations right now, we know that having very, very effective managers and leaders really is what will help distinguish any organization. And as companies are looking to do that, can you give us some final thoughts into how the 360 can help to bring that about?
Well, particularly in these economic times that we're in right now, everyone is being asked to do much more than they were in the past. And so it's very important to develop your talent to their fullest potential so that they can take on more. The 360 comes in many different forms and price ranges. Leadership is so important. It's really the foundation from which success comes in an organization. And managers are the people that employees look up to and rely on. So we're all being asked to do more in these economic times right now. And so I think any kind of development that you can give to managers and leaders to help them be the best they can possibly be, to develop to their fullest potential, is only going to help the organization be that much more successful.
This has been great, Joe. Thank you so much for sharing with us how you can optimize your management and leadership team just by taking the time to really analyze your strengths, understand how you come across to others, and discover more about the ways you can work toward building the best possible team. I think Hal said it best when he mentioned that now is the time you shouldn't wait. Because in these difficult times, you don't want to sit back and let your top performers walk out the